Now, after we generated a navbar component, let's try creating a new component that will hold our table. For example, we will generate component ng g component table component. So now the table is generated, and as we can see here, table works. But if we run our server again, we stopped our server because we need to create a new component. Every time that we need to create a new component, we should always stop our server. Now, the server is like running already, and it's still in the localhost 4200. Yet, the table is not here. The table works, words are still not here. So, what we should do is, we go back to our app component.html. Then, if we change this to app-table, you can now see the table works, word here, yet the navbar is gone. What I usually do for my own comfort, here in the table.component HTML, I insert here the navbar component, which will look like this. This works in Angular because the app-navbar or the navbar component module is accessible through all the Angular files, which in this case, the app-navbar can be accessed in table component. Then after putting this, you can now see that the navbar is showing, and here in the app component.html, I just input the app-table syntax, and then it basically shows everything that I made already. And afterwards, now we can create a table here. In here, I'm gonna insert some directives that I usually use, or the most commonly used directives in Angular. So let's start with doing the table. Then we insert the table head, we insert the table row, and we put the table header, ID, name, email. As we save that, you can see there's like already a header, but we don't have the contents for it. So what we should do is under the table head, after the table head. So it's the default thing. After the header, we insert the contents or the body of the table. So we put the body, and then in a table row, we use a directive. This directive is called ngForm. For this works like a for loop in the regular JavaScript or any other languages. Let users of user. As you can see, there's an error because we didn't still declare this inside our table.component.ts. So what I should do after encountering this error is I go here in the table.component.ts, and we create here a variable called users. Users is equals to the array that we will use. Then we insert ID, name, for example, John Doe, and the email is johndoe@example.com. Then the error is gone because the user variable is already declared. Then we add more to this. Then there you go. We just need to add two more. 2, 3. Let's say this one is different. Let's say Jane Smith. Then this name for the other one is also different. Bob Johnson. And then let's change this to Jane Smith at example.com. Let's change this to Bob Johnson at example.com. Now you can see here that the user's array is now declared here inside our type script. If we go back to our table components, we can now access this array using some languages, using some syntax. We will use the double quotes. This is the way in Angular to access a variable in TypeScript by using brackets, multiple brackets. As to remember it, always use two brackets, two open brackets and two closing brackets, so that you can access the variables in the TypeScript file. So what we do is user.id. We save it, and then it's going to generate 1, 2, and 3. As we can see here in the TypeScript, the ID is 1, 2, and 3. So that's already a for loop already. So for example, in a for loop, we do it like for integer I is equals to 3 and less than something, and etc. It's gonna keep going and going and going until it ends. But here we just only have 3 users. So what we'll do is it's only gonna go up and loop until the ID is 3. If we add 1 or make it 4, it's gonna be 4. See, it added 4 on it, but the name is the same. So what we'll do, let's say Robert Johnson, the brother of Bob Johnson. And then we change this to Robert Johnson at example.com. Then afterwards, after editing that, I can now give you the example of accessing the user name. User.name. Oh, the table name is not existing, so it should be like that. The TypeScripts or the Angular is case sensitive, so you should be aware of that. Then one more table data. It's gonna be user.email. Then if you save it, those emails are gonna be here already. I won't add CSS for now because it's not part of this lecture, but if you want to make it prettier, you can do it for your end. But for me, I'm just gonna stick this because this covers up everything that I need to discuss. Directives is very useful if we need to display a lot of items in our Angular file or web page in Angular. But in actual thing, this is not hard-coded anymore, wherein you can use some APIs to access some data, like for example, a lot of products that you have to sell or you have to put in your store, wherein after accessing that API using for loop, you can just generate it with a single line of code. It's like this, with a much simpler code that you don't need to do over and over again using directives. That's for the ng for loop. There's still a lot of directives like ngif and etc. And those are usable in some certain conditions that you need to do. Later in this course, I will give you an example about ngif so that you will be familiar with it. Now I will show you an example of a directive called ngif and how to use it. For now, let's comment out this HTML file, and also we can leave this TypeScript file here as it is, and then we'll now create the ngif directive. We will start with div, then we will use the ngif directive, which is, for example, let's call a variable is log in. Okay, it's calling an error because it can't find the is logged in variable in the TypeScript component. So we will call here or create a variable is called is logged in. Let's set the value into true. TypeScript automatically detects if it's boolean, or you can specify it here any, but I keep it like this because it's automatic with TypeScript. Then afterwards, after adding that, let's assume that this is logged in is true. given that in our TypeScript we inserted or created the is logged in variable to be true. We'll insert welcome, then we will use again the brackets so that we can access a variable in the TypeScript. So let's say username. Let's say username. It does not conflict with the users, so it's okay. Then we input username is equals to student. It shows student here, and we just need to remove that because that's like a muscle memory, sorry. And then as you can see, if is logged in is true, like as you can see here, it's true, it's gonna print out student in the HTML file. That's the purpose of ngIf, which is much more useful if you have some conditions that you need to do in your HTML file. But if the is logged in, if is logged in variable is false, it won't show anything. It won't prompt the user that you're not logged in, you're having an error in logged in. So what we should do here is we need to create a div with a directive ngIf again. Div ngIf. Instead of putting is logged in, we insert a exclamation point where you can read it as if the user is not. This exclamation point means not, so it's not logged in, so it means it's not true, it's false. This ngIf will only work if this variable is false. Then we will insert you're not logged in. If we save it, it will show here. And if we change the table variable here in is logged in, we change it to true, it's gonna show a different one wherein our ngIf condition is true, and here our ngIf condition is false. And now, as an example for a much better view for ngIf, how to use it, we will generate a new component. It's called ng generate component. Let's call it modal. We will try to click a button and see if it displays a model. App dash model. We save it. Then here we can see that the model is not working because our server is still not running. But if we run our server, let's wait for a bit for our browser is still loading. Then we save it. Then we refresh this. We can see that the modal works. Now we can edit the modal here and in its contents. So let's try to create a button. To put it click is equals to show model. Show model. And then is equals to true. Open model. Show model is still not here in the TypeScript file, so what we will do is we add it to our TypeScript so that it won't display this error. Show model is equals to false. So basically, if we don't click this button, the show model is still not true. This is false by default given that we declared this variable show model false here in this variable. So we will keep on editing the HTML file, and then after creating the button, we create a div with a class of model-overlay. Then we insert the ngIf directive show model. Then afterwards, we create another div with a class called model. This is a shortcut on creating a div with a class. We save it and we put some headers on it. Model title, let's say it's the title of our model. The paragraph inside our model content, and the button click is equals to show model is equals to false. Then we make it close button. And if we try to click it, it's still not doing anything because we didn't finish doing it. Then afterwards, after doing that, we add some CSS on it. That model dash overlay position fixed and top 0, left 0, right 0, save it. Bottom 0, background color RGBA 000, comma 0.5. Then display flex justify content center and align items center. Then that's for the model overlay. So as you can see here in our class, this is it, the class for the model overlay. And now editing the model, dot model, background color white, padding 1 rem, border radius 0.5 rem. If we try to click it, still not showing anything. Wait for a bit, I'll try to fix it. Maybe it's on click. Now the code is fixed and it's now showing the model. So as a demo, if I click this button, the model now shows because of this ngIf condition. I will explain it to you why, what's the purpose of this variable and why is it declared false in here at first. As a start, this variable show model is still false as a default, so it's not going to show anything inside of the HTML because it's declared in here that this contents will be displayed if and only if this variable show model is equals to true. Because do you remember the punctuation mark earlier? This means that it's not true. It's not show model. This variable should be false in order for this HTML code to display. So if we save that, it's going to show. Because now in the ngIf statement, it will show this HTML code with a false value of our variable, which is equivalent to our default or the default value that we set for this variable. But that's not how it's supposed to be. We'll remove this, and then understanding this code is quite tricky if you're new to it, but it's not that hard if you understand it. This first line of code, which is the button, click is equals to show model is equals to true. So when we click this button, the variable show model will be equivalent to true. Again, the variable show model, which is declared here in our TypeScript file, is still equals to false. But if we click this button, it's now going to be equivalent to true, wherein that button is called the open model. If we click this button, the model shows up. The ngIf directive in here is equal to the show model value. So this ngIf requires a true value given that we don't have the punctuation mark. So it must be equivalent in the true value. Now, if we change this, like earlier I showed you, if it's punctuation mark, this ngF will be satisfied if the value for this variable is false. So if I save it, it's gonna show the model, but it's not really how it's supposed to be. Because as general, the value for the variables must be true in order for the button to work, because if we do this, we don't need to click this button anymore and this contents will not be closed. See, it's not closing even if I click it a lot of times. Now removing this punctuation mark, and then we save it, it's gonna go back to what it's supposed to be. Then we copy this. No, not copy. We need to create a new div. Let's say model overlay false. It's an example for the false button. Then we copy this. And maybe the contents, because I think the CSS will detect this modal and then it will apply it to. Then here, copy that, paste here. Oh, it's not detecting the model. Okay, that's good because, okay, that's good. Then if we close this, it's not gonna be closed because the value is still false. Then we add the ngF statement here, show model. Then we add the punctuation mark so that it should be false. And when we click this, it disappears here because the variable show model is now equivalent to true. But if we close this, show model again is equivalent to false. So that's why this HTML code shows up. Again, after clicking this button, the variable show model is equivalent to true. After clicking this close button, because we declared in here the button click will be equivalent to false after clicking this button. So if we click this, the value for the show model is now false.